Hello, time for another Man in Gray book review. Today's book is Slow Days, Fast Company, The World, the Flesh, and L.A. by Eve Babitz. This book was originally published in 1977. This reprint edition is from the New York Review of Books, and it's from 2016, and it contains a new introduction by Matthew Spector. Eve Babitz was a visual artist and writer who was based in Los Angeles. She was born in 1943 and died in 2021. She designed album covers for the likes of The Byrds, Buffalo Springfield, and Linda Ronstadt. She wrote a series of modestly successful novels and essay collections. But up until right before the end of her life, she was all that was overshadowed by her personal life. She was known to most people who knew about Babitz for her romantic involvement in various LA celebrities. At one point, she had relationships with singer Jim Morrison of The Doors, comedian Steve Martin, actor Harrison Ford, the artist Ed Ruscha, and novelist Dan Wakefield. And as a result of this, a lot of people didn't really take Eve Babitz seriously as a writer. They just saw her as kind of a well-connected groupie who wrote kind of funny stories about L.A. But really, at the end of her life, the last 10 years of her life, though, when some of her earlier books were republished, people began to realize what an outstanding writer and how perceptive she was. She's often linked with Joan Didion, another writer based in Hollywood. But Didion was a New Yorker who came to Hollywood to write for the movies and who always viewed Hollywood and L.A. through the eyes of a cynical outsider, whereas Babitz grew up in L.A. and fully embraced the kind of crazy hedonism of Hollywood in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. But at the same time, she was self-aware. The whole time she was drinking and partying and having casual sex with strangers. She was self-aware of what she was doing, and she realized the kind of essential silliness and shallowness of a lot of Hollywood culture and the self-seriousness that so many actors and producers took themselves. This book is a collection of somewhat fictionalized essays about various relationships she had in Hollywood and LA and environs during the 1970s, during the mid 1970s. In one chapter, she meets a guy who wrote her a fan letter who's a grape grower in Bakersfield, and he convinces her to come out to Bakersfield and spend the weekend with him. And so she goes out there and is exposed to the cowboy culture of Bakersfield. Bakersfield, of course, is where Buck Owens and a number of Dwight Yoakam and a number of other country musicians hailed from. And so it was a kind of culture shock for her. And so that's a very amusing chapter where she learns about, honky-tonk dance halls and the logistics of growing grapes. And this is a time when there was this debate or labor strikes from Cesar Chavez and the Teamsters unions and so forth. So she goes into that to some degree. There's another chapter about a married Hollywood executive who picks up Babitz and takes her to a Dodger game because he's being burned out with all of the stress of his work. So he takes her to a Dodgers game. And Babitz doesn't really know anything about baseball and doesn't really care about sports. But as she watches the game, she becomes more involved in it and actually becomes more enthusiastic than her semi-boyfriend does. There's another interesting chapter about this a friend of hers who is a rising pop singer, and she's kind of this innocent girl from the North Dakota, and she becomes successful, and then they meet later, and she's like heavily drinking and dabbling with heroin, and so there's this Babitz is kind of seeing what Hollywood has done to her. And so there's various chapters like this. All of the characters in here are supposedly based on real people that Babitz knew, although they've probably been fictionalized a little bit. And they all tend to have the same kind of traits. They all party a lot. They're all kind of desperately seeking some kind of meaning to their lives. They all feel stressed out from their jobs. And they're all ultimately kind of shallow and silly in a lot of ways. So if you are interested in the culture of Los Angeles and Hollywood from the 1970s, this is a real good, insightful look at it. And Babitz was one of those people, kind of like F. Scott Fitzgerald, who could participate but at the same time was able to stand back from everything and look at it with an objective eye. So, and she writes really wonderfully evocative prose. So, if you've never read anything about Eve Babitz, this is a good book to start with. The book is Slow Days, Fast Company. The author is Eve Babitz. This has been another Man in Gray book review. Thanks for watching.